We'll talk about later more about the stadium as a whole, but we're just talking about this particular area of the cutscene. Again, when that cutscene deactivates, we're gonna be right here. And I have it set up so that when that other camera activates, the player is transported here, so that when that camera deactivates eventually, you'll be already here again for smooth transitions. And again, because this checkpoint is invisible, I have a trigger area to set this checkpoint. Again, all of these decorations are no major pieces. You should get that by now. When the text of this works and all of that deactivates during that other cutscene I was talking about, it will spawn an enemy. Spawning enemies should be something pretty easy, you know by now, but just in case, we're gonna do a little quick review about it. Here we have our spawning. You simply connect all the locators of all the areas you want the enemies to spawn, and you check on the properties here, how much time you want it to take for them to spawn. And you can set other things to them, like making them a specifically team color or something, but you don't really have to do that specifically here. When one of the enemies, the first enemy that is dropped by in here, is finished, which I believe is this one anyways, yes. You start off with just one enemy, like a regular Discord. Once you defeat that enemy, this camera right here will activate, and again, same connections, reset and play the path and activate the camera, and it goes by. This camera is for another situation, it has no relationship to what's going on this one. Here we have clue, and it's on a block, invisible barrier, sorry, to make sure he doesn't stray away, just in case. Oh, and also make sure that when using the actors I mentioned earlier connected to cameras, make sure they're in standstill or in an action that makes them stay on the same position, not in an action that makes them move around the place. When that camera deactivates, you'll get a new barrage of you'll get a new wave of enemies, which are the ones connected here. After that wave of enemies defeated, this door breaks and you'll be able to go through forward right here. And that's when we're going to talk about a bit more complex logic now. How do we make this door disappear? You do this by using a replayer. This is the replayer right here that it does that. So when wave is defeated, it will clear replayer. So if you haven't not used a replayer before, I'm going to explain to you something pretty quickly how to use it. Let's use it on this block. I want you to pop in here. Okay. You go to the replayer logic, stand on it, press record. You'll see that it's recording. If you take out your magical wand, you're gonna grab what you want to make disappear at some point. You grab it and you place it down. I strongly suggest you already have it, place it down in the position, and you just simply replace it again on the same spot. And after that, stop the replayer. Do not do anything else, because if you touch any other thing, it's gonna disappear that other piece you touch. Now that that's set up, we're gonna create quick logic. I need a button so I can show you simply. It's simple. When this button is set on by player, it will clear replayer, or you can reverse playback. If you want it to disappear, you press clear. If you wanted to make it appear, you press reverse playback. In this case, we're clearing. So I pressed it, and it's magic, it's gone. Now if you later want a logic to make it appear, you just simply switch it to reverse playback. and it's back. And that's the magic of the replayer, one of my favorite tools in the game. So what it simply did on that particular part is that I set a replayer for this particular piece. So when a wave is defeated, it clears the replayer and this disappears. There's also an indicator thing right here, which is a beacon. I have it set up so that again, when a wave of enemies defeated, this beacon activates. And you can select type of beacon. I mean radar, it's called radar maker, but I call it the beacon. You can select the type right here, what you want. Make sure this is not active if you want to activate later on, and make sure these things are off if you are not using it right at the start of your toy box. And if you have a locator, make sure you have beacon location set as locator or inactive if you're using it on inactive. Because sometimes one forgets and the beacon doesn't show up in the area that's supposed to be. It shows up in the logic. The boombox, you already know much how to use that. When the camera is activated, the boombox turns on a specific music. In this case is the rest from Daft Punk. You may be wondering, what's with these trigger areas right here? Well, sometimes enemies, if they're very jumpy, they can get out of block walls. They can sometimes get out of this area magically, but if they touch this trigger area, in other words, if they go out and touch this trigger area, it will activate a kill switch, and this kill switch right here is gonna kill the character. So you go trigger area, answered by enemy, defeated enemy, and that defeats the enemy. So that way, if the enemy manages to do magic and get out of the wall that where he's supposed to be in, he will die automatically, and the player can continue playing your toy box rather than the toy box be completely broken. The setup of enemies right here is pretty much the same, not much to explain. Wave generator, replayer, all that I show you. This trigger area right here has a toy box game maker. You might say, what? Well, the toy box game maker I have set up here is to change the difficulty. So if you want the enemies in a specific section to get more difficult, you can set it up here in the toy. You can put another toy box challenge maker and set it up to a trigger area. But if you previously have a challenge maker before that one, make sure you turn it off, that first one, so then the new one turns on with another trigger area later on. Now in here, what I did was set up a type of boss battle. Oh, and before I forget, these pieces are fantasy terrain strips that you can change the texture to nomations as well, because a lot of people don't know that trees, that fantasy land trees, can be turned into other sort of things that are not trees, or can be trees of different styles. Here is the setup for the enemies. Very simple setup. Once this enemy wave is defeated, the next one activates, and so on and so on and so on. There's not much complex logic in this one part. Once the very last one is defeated, we are going back again to a camera, which is this camera. This camera is static, no movement, and this particular one I have set to a locator. I recommend, if you're using the same place for a camera that already has another camera, try not to use the same logic. For example, in this case, it's connected to actor, which is this. But for this particular camera, I have it connected to a locator. Now we're getting to the pretty good parts right here. And this one part right here is the light cycles, which is one of my favorite part of building in this particular box. Again, you're teleported right here. After that, camera of clue threatening you activates, and we'll go to this pressure plate. This pressure plate is going to activate our challenge maker. The challenge maker is right below here. So there's a lot of settings you can use on the challenge maker. But the time results and score results specifically are used for leaderboard challenges. If you're not doing a leaderboard, you can ignore those. And locator connection is to, you can decide where you want the player to spawn right when the challenge starts, and at the same time you can also set another locator where you decide where the player ends the challenge. But these things have to be set up in the properties right here. So if you have a locator and connection, you go here and set that you have a locator connected for that. If not, it's just gonna left you exactly where you ended in the toy box, or spawn you right into the challenge maker if you want. In this particular case, I wanted to stay exactly where you left off. Always make sure to have title and description so people know specifically what they're doing this particular mission as well. If you want something to activate right when the challenge starts, you'll go to the challenge maker, new logic connection, and you'll go to started. So right when this challenge maker starts, you want the vehicle generator, for example, spawning the shield emergency vehicle. So when the challenge starts, it will spawn that vehicle. You can also set it up to other things so that when the game is completed, something happens. And if the game is failed, you can make something happen. Results close is when you have a specific score of a leaderboard challenge. If not, then you don't really have to use results close. If you want something to reset, you have to use game ended. Game ended, why not game completed? Because game ended makes sure it resets everything, regardless if you failed the challenge or completed it. It makes sure it resets. In this particular case, we have game challenge started. It will spawn all these vehicle generators, and all these vehicle generators will spawn in a light cycle, which are set up in here. My important light cycle, which is the one I'll be using, it's right gonna be here using this locator. You can connect a vehicle generator to a locator right here. And this locator right here is a location of player 1 start, where you choose where would the player spawn when the challenge maker starts. Generating vehicles on paths, the big mystery. For this particular path, I recommend that if you're going to use a vehicle that doesn't fly or has any fancy flying jumps and stuff, I strongly recommend you put all the path pasted in on the floor. Try not to do this, keep it on the floor. Why? A safety precaution. Some vehicles behave differently with the floor, and the better position they are on the floor, the better. Especially if you don't want to use the driving physics mechanic that the path tool has. For example, I'm gonna go here. This vehicle summoner is connected to the path because it's gonna be a light runner. So let's go to the properties of pathing. Here it is. Use driving physics. I have them off. Why? Because they were not behaving properly. I have it set to loop because they're going to be spinning around that entire path. But you still need to have orient along path to make sure it moves normally through the curves. So if using driving physics gives you trouble, you simply put the entire path strapped in on the floor. But how do we generate a vehicle on the path point? It's actually very simple. You simply go to the vehicle options and you set it up as a new path, and you can call it a day. Specific path point where the path starts is going to become your locator in a way, and you simply set up the challenge maker to spawn in the vehicle when it started. So like you can see here, started, generate toy box from light cycle vehicle, and the path creator is simply connected, generate cool vehicles options, toy box path, and it will automatically spawn the vehicle right there. It's actually very simple. So the light cycle action, there's actually no fancy logic into this. The light cycles run around the path, and your light cycle vehicle has a weapon, which is your weapon button in your controller depending on your console, and you simply press it and go around the light cycles until that tail of yours of the light cycle hits them and the rest. There's no logic to it in that particular case. The logic of the vehicle making the vehicle disappear is already in the game. But if to make sure you can keep track of the life cycles you defeat it, you go right here to vehicle generator, new logic connection, when generated toy defeated, and then you go to the counter. Let's look for a counter right here. For defeated, you increment one by one the count or whatever amount you want. Simple logic. When you defeat them all, you set target reach and make sure it activates what follows next. In this case, what follows next, it's enemies that will spawn in and generate the wave of enemies. The challenge maker is set to be completed at the very end, which is by this trigger area. But before I go into that, you defeat the enemies, yellow, enemy wave defeated, this camera is activated, invisible barrier to make sure Korra doesn't run away. Then a light runner will be spawned in this locator. Once that camera activates, it will be spawned by this vehicle generator and will spawn right here. And when you get into the vehicle, this wall right here will disappear and you will only see the blocks, the little blocks. This is deactivated barrier player, which I already told you about. How do I make it so that when you get in the vehicle, it clears that wall using the replayer? Simple. We go to the vehicle generator, new logic connection, generate a vehicle options. When vehicle is entered, clear replayer, which is right here. And that's that. Once that replayer is clear, you go straight with the light runner shooting at this wall. No logic on the wall, it already comes like that. And when the vehicle enters this trigger area, it will finish the challenge maker. As you see here, enter by vehicle, complete the game. And that's the end of part 1 of this toy box. So here we are on the second part. This one should be a little bit more shorter because some of the things I mentioned are repeated in this particular one. Again, pressure plate activates challenge maker. When the challenge maker is activated, it will spawn in the line runner. We already talked about vehicle spawning, and there's a toy box game maker at the beginning as well. I have a checkpoint here. This particular checkpoint activates once the challenge maker starts. You can also use that instead of a trigger area. And here you will spawn in with the light cycle and reach all this way. This trigger area is to tell you the instructions of what you have to do next, and also give you a checkpoint right here. Again, since my checkpoints are invisible, I have to make sure they get activated by something else. So we have a set of turrets right here. These turrets are from the Guardians of the Galaxy playset. There's not much logic to them, they're just placed in there, but they can fire at you. We have these yellow targets, which is our important logic of the day. The logic on them is actually very simple. They have a replayer and a counter. When this is hit by the player, meaning you shoot with the light cycle at this yellow target, the replayer will clear that target. So basically, I have it set up so that the yellow target kills himself once you hit it. Because if you don't set a replayer for this yellow target, then the target is just gonna stay there and you might want to just keep shooting at it. So instead, I want to make sure the player knows that they did it successfully. Besides giving them one more point, it clears that yellow target. This is called the rail target point. It's on the creativity toys. It's supposed to be so you can switch between rails for the rail tool, but you can use it for anything really. It's the best target point we have right now. There's other targets, but I still think this is the best one. These are blocks. This is part of the styling theming here. Over here there's one called Tron. That's this particular one. Again, when the counter reaches the target of 12, this will disappear with a replayer. Again, the wall that you have to shoot at, and we'll go straight to here. And it just deactivates the checkpoint and text. Here we have some obstacles. These already come in the toy box with platforming toys, pendulums, and you can also team platforming toys, at least some of them, with the texture. So I have a team to the same Tron texture that's already included in the game. This is the moving wall, also part of the platforming tools. And we go straight to here. Oh, here we have the racetrack curve. Racetrack pieces can be teamed. They are teamed to Tron Legacy terrain. They're really great pieces. I don't have it, so I asked for a friend to team it for me. And then we just make our way all the way through here. Boom boom, not much fancy logic in here. This activates attacks and checkpoint. We have some invisible walls here. Why these giant invisible walls here? Well, since you're going in a vehicle, I wanted to make sure you have these fancy mountains with water, but at the same time they want the player to suddenly crash into the mountain and get stuck on it. So I create these fake walls, invisibles, so that you can progress nicely. If, in case you hit a bad corner or anything, you don't fall down and get stuck forever. And for getting the light runner inside the elevator, it's a simple setup. Once the vehicle reaches this trigger area, the vehicle disappear by when trigger area is reached by a vehicle, remove generated vehicle or remove fall. This is also on the vehicle generator at the beginning. When entered by this trigger area vehicle, it will reset and play this path, which is another fancy elevator right here. Same concept of the elevator all the way here. And here we have a little cave here with Kevin Flynn. Lots of decoration pieces. They're literally part of the decoration section of the toy box categories, including the bench, which is a new toy. When the floor reaches this point, it's going to generate a friend, which is going to be Obi-Wan Kenobi in this case, which I'm using as Kevin Flynn. It will activate the friend generator, which is right here, and it will spawn in the Obi-Wan Kenobi. Friend generator works the same way as the enemy wave generator, and you simply set it up with a locator. So why do you have it generate? Because this is a second box, so when you're linking toy box doors, you have to make sure your characters spawn by a generator or your vehicles, otherwise they might not work or they might not spawning properly. But you might say, but what about that Quora, man? Well, the thing is, Quora is set with a path. If you don't want to go through the process of generating a character, you can simply set the character on a path, and at some point in the toy box make sure it resets and stops, and he will go to his original position on this green spot, always making sure it's in standstill, of course. But with the path tool you can make, it's another way to make sure the character is locked into position. However, I don't always recommend this, especially when you have so many characters or so many paths all together. So I still recommend it's best that you go with the generator. So what's this crazy logic right here? Well, okay, this is so you can set up to talk to the character. When you arrive, Obi-Wan Kenobi has a beacon. When he's generated, it's going to activate that beacon. When that beacon is activated, or when he's generated, whichever logic you prefer, the dynamic trigger will be activated. What's the dynamic trigger? It's like a trigger area, but it's set up in a locator or an actor. Here's the properties of it. I have it connected to, in this case, to Obi-Wan Kenobi, connected actor, and you decide the distance. The distance is to make sure how close the player needs to get to that character, actor, or vehicle in order for an action to occur. In other words, for the trigger area to happen. So then you just simply set up so that when this dynamic trigger is reached by the player, it will activate something. In this case, I have it to activate this logic, which is the context button assigner. What's the context button assigner? It's simple. It's a button. Yeah, it's literally a button where you can perform an action on a character or anything really. But in this case, you want to talk with the character, you simply put talk or whatever you want to do with that character, and you simply set it up so that when you reach the dynamic trigger, it goes on. Now, I recommend if you don't want the player to keep talking with that character all the time, you set it up so that deactivate prompt when pressed. I only want one simple dialogue connection, so when the player stops talking with that person, it will deactivate if you have this on. Also, I make sure that when the button is pressed, it deactivates this dynamic trigger, and it also deactivates the beacon, so that way the player knows they don't have to go back to that beacon, and so that the dynamic trigger doesn't keep triggering randomly. And of course, setting it to the text creator so that when the button is pressed, it will display a specific text. This one is also the same thing for Quora. So anyway, I have it here so that when you finish with Kevin Flynn, you go to Quora, her beacon will activate and she'll talk to you, and when that dialogue finishes, you'll be teleported to your next area, which is on this city area. You'll be teleported right here. Once you enter this trigger area, your life cycle will spawn from the vehicle generator and you can move along forward. These are all racetrack pieces using the Tron terrain power disc. All these paths are like runners that are running around. They're for decoration purposes so that it feels like it's a street where some cars pass around. Here you have also the recognizers that move along the place. You go through all that bridge, you go here, and this will activate a beacon. You mean what beacon? Well, a beacon that is gonna show up right here to tell you that this is the end of Flying Club that you need to look for. And it also activates these people on paths, so it has movement around the toy box. The rest of this toy box here is a city I built using Avengers buildings pieces. I'm trying to make sure they're the best in terms of the lighting, to make sure they have the lighting I want of Tron Legacy. And pretty much the same here. Another fancy elevator, you already know the drill about this one, but in this one you don't need to go with the light cycle inside. Instead you just go as a player and the elevator will go up. Once you reach that trigger area, it will activate friend generator people, and they're gonna be spawning around all these locators. And this is the club. Again, lots of animation. Here, this cobalt texture for the walls. This is an animation floor piece that I use as a rooftop because I like the little spotlight they have over there to give it a club feeling. Same logic like I did with Kevin Flynn and Quora, so that he has the button, the beacon, the dynamic trigger, all of that. And once you finish talking with him, it's gonna degenerate the friendly people and generate a wave of enemies. And you'll defeat the enemies, la la la, and the challenge maker ends. The challenge maker that's at the very beginning is set to end once you defeat that particular wave of enemies. And it will activate this camera, and when this camera activates, it's gonna spawn in Kevin Flynn, and you'll get your final dialogue, and the toy box is over. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Sorry if I talk a lot or if it was anything confusing. If you have particular questions, make sure you write it down on the comments, or I'll answer you and direct you. If you have questions about a particular logic in another box, let me know and I'll do a video about it as well. I'm trying to do this at least with all the 3.0 toy boxes I have featured, show you a bit of the logic process and just hopefully guide you. Thank you very much for watching this very first entry of making the box. I hope it helps you grow as a toy box artist in some way. Thank you for watching and keep on building.